Appamada's programs and facilities are supported through your generosity. Your support really does make a huge difference. You'll find a link for contributions on the website at appamada.org/contribute. Thank you so much.
So welcome everybody. It's class 2. I'm trying to get my little mind map up so I can see where we're going. And I see that the first thing I thought we might do is talk about your homework and how that went for you. How would you answer Śuddhodana's questions, and what do you think? And then the practice with the alive or dead koan. So if anybody has any thoughts about that, that would be great. It's good to see everyone.
Well, I was scared by my answers because they were so certain. And we had almost like a Zoom bomber the other night who interpreted a koan, and he was so clear about what it meant that it was scary. And I saw that in myself. And I thought, how can I know for sure what I said? You know, they were like all the obvious answers. Then we were just reading in my grandmother's hands, and we had to do an exercise where we were visited by an ancestor that we had never met. And it was so interesting how we were able to do that.
Uh-huh.
And it made me really suspicious about, not suspicious, it gave me another view of this stuff is all within us. This, and so it made me really curious, I guess.
Well, that's a good place to go.
How was it that I was able to? I was in Russia hundreds of years ago, standing on the street where my grandfather and his father was, you know, who I'd never met. And anyway, so that was interesting to have that experience rather than to be the one who is certain about this stuff.
Yeah. I think it's really important that we keep a really open mind and to try and see what the ways in which our own conditioning gets in the way and the ways in which we get some clarity. And that's what I like about this particular sutra, because the Buddha is quite certain in it. He has a lot of certainty in this sutra. So if you went, how many people read it? Yeah,
I just read the questions. I didn't read I've heard you before your talk a long time ago.
Yeah. It's kind of daunting in the beginning because all the translators, you know, background and context of where it comes from. You have to like jump to the translation because it's all about the background of arcane Tibetan linguistics. So, which we don't study. So, so you kind of have to jump to the text itself. And even that is in fairly archaic, formal, kind of language of the Buddhist sutras. So it can be a little bit challenging, I think. So, yeah.
I'm kind of with Kim. At first, I felt certain about the questions. And oh, by the way, I did not read the sutra. I only tried to find the questions, right? Because I wanted to see what came up for me.
Right.
And I seemed pretty certain, but then even my certainty was uncertain. Like, for instance, are beings consistently reborn as their own kind with other human, are humans born as humans and so on? And so I put no, but then I also put, I don't remember being born in the first place. So I really don't know, and so, I found that every question I felt kind of like certain until I could find reasons why maybe I wasn't certain. You know?
Yeah.
So the only one that I had certainty was, let's see. Oh, do the dead show themselves to their relatives just as they were when alive? And since I had an experience of being visited by a dead relative, there was a yes, they do, but no, they don't. You know? It was yes, there was the essence of this alive, this very real experience, and yet they weren't quite exactly the same.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, it's just one of those Zen paradoxes, right? You knew it was them, but they didn't have the exact same features they had when you.
Right. They had some essence that I recognized as them, or maybe even saw their face or heard their voice and knew it was them. And yet there was something about them that was different.
Interesting. Yeah.
Yeah. Maybe more at peace or something, you know, not with the, I don't know. I'm not sure.
These questions raise more questions, right? Even questions about our own beliefs or what we think might be true, or they're very provocative. And I think they're the questions we might naturally have when someone dies, maybe not in this exact form, because he's talking specifically about these Brahmanic funeral rites, you know, so are these doing any good? Are they worth anything? So, Lisa?
You have to unmute yourself, Lisa, because that's how you've got it set.
What I was trying to do was look back at my comments I made on Google Drive, but then it disappeared. So what I focused on, just kind of in a playful way, was the absolutes and extremes that are mentioned. Now I can't read them because I can't get the text, but do beings utterly disappear? Are they consistently, reborn in certain way? So, when you focus on that, I could come up with different answers, kind of limited more by my imagination than by logic or reason. Because, if things are inconsistent, there's a lot more options than if they're utterly. My answer, okay, I did some answers, brief written answers one day. And then I came back this morning and I looked again, and, more answers had arisen from who knows where, right?
Right.
So, how long might that process go on? And if I were just playing, and for me, it has to be like, I have to let myself be a little silly. If I'm trying to be like, oh, this has got to make sense, I really don't get very far. Yeah.
Yeah. So you have to have this kind of spacious, playful quality about it.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. What about you, Ellen?
Well, a couple of things. One, what you said about the Buddha seemed so certain, that did influence me. That affected me. He was sure about all this stuff. And about what Gail was talking about, do you see your relatives or not? Because I've had plenty of patients who see their relatives shortly before they die. And so have all of my coworkers. And I've always wondered about that. And I thought it was interesting. He talks about Gandharvas and other beings being sort of like little tricksters and taking on the appearance. And I thought that was interesting. And that could be a way of just talking about our psychology or neuropsychology. And I thought that was interesting. And then a question I have is, he says that that the dead do not, they're disembodied, so they don't eat. If you leave them out food and drink and all that, that they don't, it doesn't do anything. And I thought that was interesting that he said that, because we leave food out for the Buddha all the time. So what's that about? And should we still be doing it?
I think you have to think about it in a different way. It's mythic. So it's about your offering. It's not about the Buddha's going to enjoy this.
Okay.
It's where the offering comes from.
You could do that for your relatives as well. And
Generosity, absolutely. Yeah.
okay.
And that is a sort of approved use, of that kind of ritual. Is it's not because the dead are going to be eating and drinking those offerings. It's it's the spirit in which you offer them.
At the Marie Labeau's gravesite in New Orleans, she's got all kinds of food and cigarettes and liquor all the time.
More about the people who come and want to have this outpouring, right? And it's the probably the classic act of generosity, because there's no possibility of reciprocity. So
I'm going to bring her some next time I go.
Offering without an exchange in mind, so like she'll appreciate this, or she'll like me, or she'll approve of me, or I'll get points in heaven, or, no, none of that. So it's just an outpouring of generosity without any exchange built into it.
Thanks.
Yeah. Maria.
Yeah, it burns my brain a bit. All these questions and things, and there's kind of a bit of a tension of kind of, looking at it all, because for me, I've always had that struggle with it. It's like, once we're dead, and we kind of like, do we just have to believe there's something else because our ego says there's no way we cannot exist anymore? So there's that feeling in me. And then my science background with psychology is kind of like any kind of visitations that I've had. It's like my brain is just reenacting memories. It's creating these things, and I kind of, the biochemistry can explain so much of the things that people explain, and all the questions that he asks, I'm like, nah.
They think the biochemistry explains it, but actually, even the biochemistry itself needs explanation. Even the biochemistry itself is a kind of religious belief.
Right?
Yeah,
but I think with like psychosis and when people are seeing things and the imagery is so real that it's indistinguishable to that person, there's that kind of, that for the person without psychosis can have that kind of imagery as well. The brain's capable of so much.
Oh, yes, absolutely. Yeah. As brain scientists are quick to tell you.
And that alive or dead thing, that was really interesting, sitting with that. Really interesting. It's kind of, and it was kind of like, for me, there was all kind of things coming up in me, and it was like alive or dead to everything that was just arising in me. And it was really interesting kind of seeing how I related to that, alive or dead, and looking at, what's real and what isn't, and what's past and what I'm creating, and what's right here, right now.
That's right.
There wasn't a lot that was right here, right now. There was a lot of memories and thinking and stuff going on that's not here. It's not alive right now. So it's how we bring it back, how we recreate. And so it was really interesting just to study that and look at that and be with that.
And don't you think it's funny that Koan returns in the 21st century as Schrodinger's cat? Right? Same question, right? Alive or dead?
Yeah. It just your brain starts to kind of break up a bit, doesn't it? And you get a bit of space between kind of what you think, what kind of can be rigid, and then I can feel it kind of giving a bit of space happening of what I kind of think to, possibilities.
Yeah. I mean, this is why we want to be exploring this topic, right?
Because it's always been a kind of I kind of stay away from it and wonder because I'm not. It's kind of like, because in my head it's like once we die, we die. So it's interesting to challenge that. I thought, to look at that, challenge that, see what's, what other people think, and kind of really just look into it a bit more.
Another belief system.
Yeah, absolutely.
And another one that is based on zero evidence, because you don't know.
That's it, isn't it? We don't know anything, and that's the thing, isn't it? We don't know. We can't know. It's impossible to know.
We have to keep what Suzuki Roshi called the soft, flexible mind.
Mm.
And that gives us a chance to play with, as Lisa was talking about, play with some of these concepts and ways of thinking, and reports of the Buddha's teachings and how those resonate with us, right? Just how they resonate. So, yeah. Did you read the sutra?
I did.
It's officially mind-blowing, I think. I was surprised when I came across it.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Okay. Well, Sheila?
Greetings, everyone. I'm so sorry I missed last week, although I don't feel like I missed it because thanks to Maria, I was able to do the video and catch up. And I was telling Maria, I even bowed at the end to Peg as if she could see me. So it was very good.
It's a little bow of completion, like, oh.
Yes, exactly. It was wonderful. So I didn't, though, have a lot of time with the questions, but for me, what I realized is that that's a good thing, because all my life I have been trying to find answers using this instead of using this.
Right.
And I'm so grateful for the practice, because I think it has opened me up to just basically to the mystery of life and death, and that because it is all such a mystery, it can't really be separated out or figured out in rational ways. Even though, it's good to experience people and authors and that do attempt to answer questions. And so that's what I love so much about this kind of class, or this kind of group, is that we really can experience through others' words that mystery and sort of live with it. And I love that. And what I'm so like Maria in that I did read after I had watched and thought about the questions. I did read the sutra, but I mean, my brain felt like fried after when I ended it. I was sort of like, okay, well, what did I even read? I mean, it was that discombobulating. But I recognize that too I'm very grateful for that, because it does get us out of that gets me out of that analytical mind that's always searching for the right answer. So knowing that, basically the answer to my question, to the questions, was almost immediately, I don't know. I just don't know. But how wonderful to have a group of people who are exploring it and talking about it. So I'm very grateful for that. And also the Koan triggered in me this it's sort of not an either or question for me. It's sort of a both and. We're both alive and dead all the time because our cells are dying, all the time. And there's the scientific stuff about how every 7 years, I think it is, that all of our cells have changed, and
It's a great example of the intellectual approach to the koan.
I'm sorry.
That's a great example of the intellectual approach to the koan.
Right.
That's the analogy. Our minds have to go there first. This is why the teachers well, and out we go. We have our good answers, and we're pretty happy with the answers, and then we just gets blown up basically.
Right. Glad to be here today.
Yeah, definitely. So, Darcy?
So I wrote down the questions, read just the questions. It struck me that it felt like the questions were really a product of the people and their times, their culture, their religion, very much like nowadays. And they're coming from this part of us that wants certainty and answers. And I was really glad. I was more interested in thinking about where the questions came from than answers to the questions, actually. And I was really glad that you had asked us to ask our own questions, come up with our own questions before, reading these questions. Because I remember thinking, these aren't my questions. Most of them weren't. A few of them touched on what felt important to me, but the quality of the questions, the source of the question, I don't know. That's where I went with that. I think for the most part.
Got interested in the backstory.
Yeah. And what was
because the way we approach these great mystery of death and whatever may or may not be after death is really a product of our time, right? And our conditioning, and what kinds of stories we heard as children, what kinds of things we believed when we were teenagers, and the ways that we've sort of navigated the way, to where we are now. So
I was just going to say also, it depends on what part of me I go to. Like if it wasn't an academic part. Like for me, death is not an abstract thing right now,
Right. And it isn't for any of us, although we might like to fool ourselves into thinking it is, but.
Mm-hmm. So like the koan put me into a real meditative state where I was feeling like all the people in my family and alive or dead. And so it's difficult to put into words, but I had a sense of where they were, and it's sort of in space around me. And it brought up some very interesting relational, I don't know what you'd call it, a sense of relationality. But it wasn't, and kind of like Sheila and others have said, it was like an interweaving of aliveness and deadness in all of them, alive, and those who have passed on and those who haven't.
Yeah.
And where they were in relation to others. It was really interesting.
Yeah. It's a very relational question, isn't it? Yeah.
Could I just say, Joan has a question, just in case you're moving on. That was all.
See that? Okay, Joan.
Well, since I came into the class late, I just wanted to tell you where I am because I'm still having trouble following all the things you posted.
Oh.
But my own experience recently was a very dear friend died. She's a person who was a great model for living. She went out with such grace and humor. Martha Ward, some of you know Martha anyway. Mm-hmm. And it just affected me very, very deeply.
Yeah.
see how it can be done. And also at the same time, I'm looking at the pictures of the universe that we're connected with all the way. And
The
wondering
Those? Oh, they're amazing.
and what little part we have in it. So I'm at peace with those kinds of things. And it means that I'm not really asking questions. I'm just saying that's where I am and it feels fine,
Yeah.
which is a bit dangerous because you can't stay there forever. But it's brought me to that just with these immediate things to see the way Martha left this life. Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's my entry. And I'm going to try and catch up. But just seeing what you've been talking about, I don't have it all, have even how to find it yet.
Yeah. Lisa?
You
You're
have to unmute yourself, Lisa.
Mhm.
There you go.
I'm unmuted, right? I was going to say, I wanted to comment on the koan first. I've always just hated that koan. And I still do kind of hate it because, you know, I'm never satisfied with when I come up. So hearing others talk about it has kind of broken up my limitations. But then I have a question about something in the Sutra as the Buddha is talking. And he says, consider the following. It is due also to the maturation of habitual tendencies stemming from long-standing association that one sees children and relatives and that they appear in dreams. And he refers to the maturation of habitual tendencies elsewhere. And, you know, I thought that's a really interesting language. I mean, it sounds very contemporary and psychological in some ways. And it also, you know, it touches on, you know, how valid and useful are, if I understand it, our habitual tendencies are, because they kind of preserve our sanity. I mean, otherwise, when people disappeared, they would just disappear, if you know what I mean. Maybe we wouldn't know it, but they do tend to live in us based on our association. And then he said something about, you know, the way people recollect a building, you know, a mansion, a palace that's intact. And then if in reality the palace crumbles, the habitual association is still that we see it whole.
Mhm.
So I found that, isn't that pretty convincing? You know, I liked that. I didn't like the certainty of it. I just, well, yeah, I don't imagine people as being rotted, maybe in, okay, you know what I'm saying.
Yeah. 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 And there, a lot of people would bridle at that certainty, and his listeners did. That's why they challenged him.
Mhm.
You know, they challenged him. How do you know? And the first challenge came from Devadatta, who was his cousin, who also had tried to have him assassinated several times unsuccessfully, and tried to split off the Sangha. So he was quite a character. Mehdi, did you have a question?
Okay, I was fascinated by the, you know, first program and then the 5 remembrances. Beautiful. I have copies of that. Anyway, the change issue, the subject of change in life and our culture, I go to this little bit larger issue of culture and social changes. And what is happening to the women in Iran, the movement that is a huge, you know, news. It's under the radar because we are going in US through some other social issues. but it is a significant, there is a disconnect with my, your very dear sister and other friends. But we are very hopeful that there would be some kind of a change. I mean, this is the idea that I have been preoccupied with at this point, how to influence and what to do and not to do. And I mean, this is not just the personal death or health and all of that. It's much more issue. I just had to bring it up.
A global issue. It's
global issue, global change.
More visible in Iran because it's exploded there, but this is a global. Yes. The treatment of women is a global issue, not something confined to Iran. But Iran is where it's like, yeah. So
but my thinking, and as far as the body and the biology, it is on constant dying and rebirth. It is very much what I think it's happening all the time. It's repairing itself. It's dying and repairing, dying and repairing. And on the higher levels, we get to mind and social issues, and then the cultural issues. I mean, maybe I'm thinking too much.
Well, it really causes us to speculate, like we really start to think about these issues in a larger dimension than just the self. And that's what you're pointing to. I think that's really true. So these are the sort of the grounds on which we enter this sutra, these questions that the Father has asked. And it's really, to me, it's really interesting, this scene. You can imagine the villagers, you can imagine the Father is really distressed. This is a member of their clan, the Sakya clan. It's Shakyamuni Buddha, it's of the Shakya clan. So it's a member of their clan. And so you can see that the Father is really trying to puzzle this out and really distressed. So so I had a thought about a little way that we could play with this a little bit. I'm really debating with myself which of these two things I want to do with you. But I think I think what we want to do is be in breakout rooms in groups of 2. And I'll tell you what we're going to do. It's a very simple practice that you're going to do with another person. And you're going to take turns. So you'll each have, you'll each have 3 minutes speaking and 3 minutes questioning. So there's going to be a questioner and a person who's the answerer. And then you're going to switch. So it doesn't matter which one is first. The questioner is going to ask questions that are simple, obvious questions almost anyone could answer. Were you born in Nebraska? Have you ever been a librarian? Like simple questions anybody could answer easily with a yes or no. The responder only has 2 possible answers. So you're going to find a place inside you that can truthfully answer, I don't know. Or if you're not able to find that place at all, you can pass. So that's the whole setup for the whole exercise. The questioner is going to ask simple questions. Do you have a car? Have you ever had a pet? Very simple questions that can be answered yes or no. The responder only has 2 possibilities. I don't know and pass. Susan?
Do the questions need to be about the person, or can they be about anything?
They can be about anything. For example, is Jimmy Carter the president of the United States?
Okay, perfect. Yeah.
Yeah. So, but your respondent has to find a place where they genuinely feel they don't know, or they have to pass. So I've had to pass only twice doing this exercise. And once it was when someone asked if I had ever had a child. And I couldn't unknow that. So those are your two options. I don't know or pass. You're each going to have 3 minutes. Then I'm going to give you a few minutes to discuss together what that felt like. You may think you can predict what's going to happen, but you can't actually. So don't worry about it. And even if you've done this exercise before, you won't be able to predict how that will unfold for you. Yes, Gail.
So you mentioned the 3 minutes. So it's 3 minutes with one person questioning and the other person answering, and then you switch for 3 minutes.
Right.
The next 3 minutes, it's the opposite. Okay.
Now, my one caution is when you're asking questions, don't fire them at the person like a machine gun. Ask a question, give them time, give them space. And when they answer, give a little bit of space and then ask the next question. It's not something to rush through. It's really, you're really giving the person time to really reflect. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and the question and the answer has to be, I don't know or pass.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, Joan?
You have to click on mute, Joan. There you go.
Are we to make up the questions or do you give them out?
No, you're going to pick them up. But they're just ordinary questions you would ask somebody, maybe somebody you met for the first time, or, have you ever been to college? Do you have a husband? Whatever. Just ordinary, very ordinary questions to find something out about another person.
As many as we can do in 3 minutes?
Well, I wouldn't put it quite that way because it makes it seem like a race. But yes, you'll have 3 minutes and give people a space so that they have a little bit of space to answer and they don't feel like they're just being assaulted by questions. Does that make sense? What do we have? Do we have an even number of people? Leslie?
I guess we're not asking any questions that are trying to make them answer one way or the other. It's
No.
just, okay.
No. They're questions to which you genuinely don't know the answer.
Okay.
So, yeah.
And is it kind of like you've said here, I've got yes or no, then I've got I don't know, pass. So if somebody says to me, do you have a car? Am I saying I don't know or pass?
Yes, you're saying I don't know or pass. Those are two.
So if I do have a car, I have to say pass because I can't say, mind you, I don't have a car, do I? I don't really own it.
Well, and the other thing is, do you actually know that you have it, or has someone stolen it in the brief interim you've been talking to this person? So do you actually know the answer to that question? Right?
Right. Yeah, got you.
So
I think it's important to clarify the answer to that question, Maria, could be I don't know or pass. If you can find the place inside of you where you believe you don't know.
Right.
Right. Thank you.
And otherwise it's pass. Right? Okay.
But not yes or no.
But not yes or no.
Right.
You're supposed to just go inside and see, can you get to a place where you really genuinely don't know? Do I have a child? I don't know, because I don't know if he's living at this moment. Right? Okay. So you want to put people in their rooms. And is there a way to broadcast when the 3 minutes is up, Maria?
Yeah, I can do that. I can broadcast 3 minutes to go.
And then after the next 3 minutes, then they'll have about 5 minutes to discuss.
Right. So is it 3 minutes each?
Yes.
And you want me to broadcast?
Just switch partners.
Right. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I can do that.
And then at the end, it's just discuss, it'll give people a chance to talk about what that felt like.
Yeah.
Okay.
So that's like 11, 12 minutes then? How long would you like it to be?
11 minutes. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
Means you quickly have to decide who's the listener and who's the speaker first.
And here we go.
Okay, we're coming close to the end of our time. I want to quickly view these questions of the answers that the Buddha gave, but I will also send these out to you. I have a kind of a summary cheat sheet, so I can show you. I'll share this screen with you. Can you see this? Yes?
Yeah.
So basically what I did was make a little map here about these questions, the short version and the full version of the question, and then the Buddha's answer. So he says, for the first one, "Oh, great king, with regard to your question as to whether gods are reborn as gods and so forth, the answer is no. Suppose that when gods died, they were reborn only as gods and not reborn as other types of being, and the same for humans and so forth. O great king, initially humans come from gods, and the three lower realms come from humans' engagement in non-virtue. Therefore, those gods and so forth who die are reborn in various other types of migrations. Suppose, moreover, O great king, that the answer to this question of yours were to be yes. Then it would be logical that the quantities of the 6 types of beings would always be the same as what they are now. But notice how the 3 lower realms are more numerously repopulated due to the preponderance of humans' engagement in non-virtue." So basically he's saying, yes, you can be reborn in any of the 6 realms that the Buddha has talked about. Okay, do beings become utterly non-existent after death? And this is a very common belief. And even in some Zen teachings, they seem to cling to this belief. The Buddha says, "O great king, regarding your question as to whether sentient beings die and become utterly non-existent, like ashes of a fire that has died out, and as to whether rebirth is utterly non-existent, the answer is no. O great king, just as when you have a seed, a fruit will come forth, so from the seed of this life, the fruit of the next life comes about. O great king, just as the sun rises, slowly sets, becomes obscured, and then rises again the following morning, so too one passes from this life and takes rebirth. O great king, sentient beings would become extinct species if they died without any subsequent rebirth. O great king, if we take the grass and trees outside too, those that have withered will grow again through the changing of the seasons. Likewise, sentient beings will be reborn and die through actions and afflicted emotions, which are like the changing of the seasons. So, O great king, know that there are future lives." So much of the Buddha's teaching is with analogy in this way. And so he'll have at the end, 8 analogies that he'll talk about. So the question on, do beings after their death accompany their dead ancestors and relatives in a world of death? That is, a heaven or a hell with all of your family and all of your ancestors. And he says, no. So you asked whether it is as the worldly say it is. You ask whether all sentient beings after their deaths live on befriending their kin in a beginningless lineage, including parents, grandparents, great-grandparents, and so forth, and not taking rebirth in a future life, but living just as they did in this life. O great king, in this life, when a parent or a child and the like see each other, it is one embodied being seeing another, not one mind seeing another. If in this life the body perishes and is gone, then in the hereafter, how would one mind see another and befriend it? Children, nephews, and nieces who are alive and have physical forms cannot even see their deceased parents, grandparents, and great-grandparents. Then how would disembodied deceased people see and befriend their formless parents, grandparents, and great-grandparents? What is more, O great king, in this life, when the many parents, children, and other relatives get together, even then, it is only their respective physical forms that appear. Unable to see even their own minds, how could children and other relatives ever see each other's minds? How would they see them after death? How would they in an afterlife first see the children, relatives, grandparents, and great-grandparents, and then befriend them? O great king, let us suppose that an ancestor who had no one before him at any point in beginningless time, as well as his presently existing descendants, were to befriend each other in a future life. Now there are at present many different clans, castes, factions, and parties, some of which have become enemies of each other, and whose places of residence, associates of clan and caste, language, and style of dress are neither heard of nor seen. Suppose that they too issued from the same original ancestor. How would you delineate which children and relatives do or do not befriend present children, relatives, grandfathers, and so forth? The offspring from this first ancestor up to and including the presently existing relatives and children would be alike in their respective affections and antagonisms for each other, just like the presently existing children and relatives. If this is so, who befriends whom and who fails to befriend whom? So he goes on, he's talking about the persistence of this idea and why it's just not feasible. So although people appear as embodied entities in this life, nonetheless, when they are in the dark or hidden, they do not see each other. Then, given that deceased beings do not have any bodies, how could they see and thus befriend each other? O great king, if embodied sentient beings who are alive now cannot even make their bodies visible to people in some other country or to the different places that they don't see, then how could they ever make their bodies visible after death? O great king, you should not listen to worldly individuals who seek fame and gain and thus deceive others with the tales they tell. So this is a kind of a caution. So then there's the question about, is wealth or poverty consistent from life to life? Do the wealthy continue to be wealthy and the poor to be poor? To which he says, no, it's not true. And he says, great king, some people are wealthy and proud from life to life because they have always been generous. Others are poor and humble in some lives or at the beginning or end of certain lives because they were partial or had regrets about giving. Some are poor and humble in life after life because they always stole or were miserly. Yet others are wealthy and proud in some lives or at the beginning or end of certain lives because they regretted their theft and miserliness. O great king, being poor and humble does not come about through generosity. Being wealthy and proud does not come about through miserliness. One does not simply arbitrarily switch between riches and poverty from one life to the next. So then he asks about whether people will be able to enjoy the things they enjoyed in this life. The many pleasures that we have, going out to dinner with friends, having a nice car. And he says, no, it is not as the worldly say it is. So he goes on and explains why not. So this is a really long answer, and he's talking about some other things as well in the middle of this answer. The sixth question is, can one dedicate food and other offerings to the deceased and thus assure their perpetual welfare and nourishment? And he basically says, you asked whether those who have passed on from this world can eat and drink inexhaustibly for many eons the small portions of food and drink given and dedicated to them by their parents, siblings, and cousins, children, and other relatives. Anywhere, be it on the four continents and the chiliocosms, the dichiliocosms, the trichiliocosms, these are the multiverses, or in the limitless, unfathomable, unimaginable world systems, have you ever seen a sentient being who consumes one small portion of food and drink all the time and over many eons? Have you ever heard of such a sentient being? So he goes on saying no, but it's like, suppose that some living parents, children, siblings, and cousins who have a mutual relationship and wish to be of benefit to each other have not yet died and are still physically embodied, and suppose one went off to another country. Although any of the parents, children, siblings, or cousins might resolve to give and offer a lot of food and drink to them, such would not happen even in the dreams of one who had gone off to the other country. In that case, why bother to talk about food and drink in reality? Why bother to talk about food and drink dedicated to someone who has died and has no body? How would that person whose mind has separated from his body after death use his immaterial and formless mind to take possession of the real items of food and drink? But he's going to go on to say it's not entirely useless. The king's going to ask, is it totally useless? And he's going to say, no, it's not totally useless. And I think what he's really getting at is it's not useless because of the generosity that's evoked in the person who's making the offering. So again, it's an offering without exchange. So it's not so much that the person who's dead would benefit as it is that this opens the heart of the person who's making an offering. Okay, so do the dead show themselves to their relatives just as they were when alive? Now, he goes on a very long rant about this, and he says, not really, but that there's a lot of stories about this. And he said, If the body of the dead person is left behind in this world, how could his incorporeal mind ever speak? Now, when we say that a dead person has a body, we mean that he has taken rebirth, for which parents were required. So there is no world of death either. So basically, he's going to go on to say that there are all these projections that are made by various, mischievous beings, devas and other, sort of beings in the Buddhist cosmology that create this almost like a projection of the person. So that's what he says. So then I put down here Devadatta's challenge, who says, so Gautama, you have explained whatever distinctive signs there are or are not in the afterlife after death. From whom did Gautama first hear about them? When did you come to know about them? Who heard and knew about them along with you? So then he gives his reply, and then there's the test. There are two big tests of the Buddha's omniscience in this sutra. And then the Buddha gives his 8 analogies. I'm not going to go into this. We really should have a 2-hour class. Maybe we should continue this next time because we can talk about the 8 analogies then. And it's important because these analogies are really illuminating. Okay, so Devadatta makes this challenge, and he's like, so who are you? How do you know these things? And the Buddha says, for countless eons, I practiced numerous sorts of austerities, such as sacrificing my body. I purified all obstructions, perfectly accumulated a great collection of merit, and thus attained omniscient wisdom. There is nothing I do not know concerning any knowable matter before me in the past or in the limitless 10 directions in the present, or concerning all knowable matters that will occur in the future. Just as when the sun shines here in Jambudvipa, it does not shine over things gradually or in stages, but shines clearly all at once. So too I know in one instant everything that can be known, and thus it is said that I possess the exalted wisdom that knows all aspects. So for those of you who read the sutra, you know that the challenge is a challenge to his omniscience, where, hold on a second, and I'll call it up here. So he's just said, I have exalted wisdom that knows all aspects. Devadatta did not believe in these sorts of statements either. In order to test whether the Blessed One actually did possess omniscience, he cut samples of a vast number of different sorts of wood, that is, of all the types of trees here on Jambudvipa, including sandalwood, waved-leaf fig trees, catechu, and so forth. He burnt them and made small bags for the ashes of each one. So as not to be mistaken about which type of wood each bag of ash came from, he labeled each bag of ash with the appropriate name. He then went to the Blessed One and asked, Blessed One, if you possess omniscient wisdom, then which bag of ash belongs to which tree? And he showed him the small bags of ashes one by one. For each small bag, the Blessed One explained unmistakably which tree the ash had come from, saying, this one is sandalwood ash, this is waved-leaved fig ash, this one is catechu ash, and so forth. So Devadatta thus did come to believe that the Blessed One really did have omniscient wisdom. So he praised him, and he decided these pronouncements on death were all true. And he thus praised him and was left at a loss for words. He had no more arguments. So Sakya Mahanaman, now this will be a kinsman, some kinsman in the village, was present. Not believing what the Blessed One had said about death, he asked, Blessed One, did you directly perceive what you have explained about the death of beings, or did you hear it from someone else, this gossip? The Blessed One replied, Mahanaman, there is nothing in the world that my Buddha eye does not see. When a fresh gooseberry is placed in the palm of the hand, all of the features of the hand are conspicuous in it. Likewise, there is no knowable thing whatsoever in the 3 times that I do not see. I do not base myself on hearsay. So, Sakya Mahanaman, in order to test whether the Buddha was truly omniscient or not, then went to the great city of Kapilavastu. From each household there, he took a small bag of rice, and so that he wouldn't mistake whose rice was whose, he wrote down the name of every Sakya he took them from and put those names inside the small bags. When the rice bags came to be a full load for an elephant, he went to the Blessed One and asked, Blessed One, if your Buddha eye sees all, then please recognize, without opening them, which Sakya's small bags of rice are which. And he put down the elephant's load of small bags in front of the Buddha. The Blessed One held up each small bag in turn and said, this one belongs to Sakya Nandaka. This one belongs to Sakya Kaya. This one belongs to Sakya Desire, and so forth, assigning the appropriate Sakya to each bag of rice, and thus unmistakably, step by step, stating the names till they were finished. With this, Sakya Mahanaman and others were all convinced that the Blessed One's Buddha eye saw all things. They thought that the Blessed One's explanation about death was surely right and commended him as follows. So he says a little poem of praise. So now he talks, the king then says, there are sentient beings that have committed non-virtues, such as actions bringing immediate retribution, on account of which they come to experience unbearable ripening of such actions. Please explain what sorts of things they should do to attain happiness. So he explains the kinds of necessary steps. So those who have committed non-virtuous actions, like those actions bringing immediate retribution, will become pure if they sincerely believe in the ripening of the actions and confess them deeply. So the understanding is that the fruit of your actions might ripen in this lifetime, or they might ripen in some future lifetime. If at death they regret the negative actions they committed earlier, pay homage and go for refuge to all the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas, their negativities will become pure. Such beings will also be reborn in high states. Do not think that there are no future lives, nor should you think that rebirth is caused by God arbitrarily or through mere caprice and the like. Have no attachment to any worldly happiness or cyclic existence. So here's where he says, O great king, when you pass from this world to the next and take rebirth, it is not something permanent that transmigrates in this way, nor something that is extinguished, halted, and hence non-existent. It is neither uncaused, nor risen from something without a cause, nor made by an agent. Understand it to be produced by an aggregate of causes and conditions, that is, actions and afflictive emotions. Well, here's where the great king is like throwing up his hands. It's like, if the transmigration and rebirth of sentient beings is not the transmigration of something permanent, nor of something extinguished, nor without a cause, nor made by an agent, and if, moreover, the established fact of rebirth in the world beyond is difficult to understand, are there any analogies for it? And this is where the Buddha gives 8 analogies. So I'm going to take you back to the chart. Hold on a second. I have to get back to this. So now he's going to ask for these 8 analogies, or ask for some analogies. The Buddha is going to give him 8 analogies. So I gave you this. This will be in the handout that I send out to you too. So he says, O great king, in these 8 analogies, the fact that earlier things give rise to the later ones illustrates how nothing permanent transmigrates. The fact that later things arise from earlier ones illustrates how transmigration and rebirth do not occur without a cause, and that they are not of something extinguished and halted. So the first analogy is the analogy of students learning that which is recited by the teacher. He says, furthermore, O king, the teacher illustrates this life. The student illustrates future lives. Recitation illustrates how consciousness bridges the gap between lives. That's the first analogy. Students learning that which is recited by the teacher. Second analogy is a lamp being lit from another lamp. He says the earlier lamp illustrates this present life. The later lamp illustrates future lives. Though the later lamp arose from the earlier lamp, the fact that the one existed before the other illustrates how nothing permanent transmigrates. That the later one arose from the earlier one illustrates how things do not occur without causes. Does that make sense? You light a lamp from another lamp. Now, can you see it? Here's the analogy 1.
Yes.
Yeah.
And then sort of the Buddhist explanation of that analogy. So a lamp being lit from another lamp. Then a reflection occurring because of a mirror. And he says the mirror illustrates how future lives exist because present lives exist, how nothing real transmigrates, and how future lives definitely do exist. So then analogy number 4 is an impression and image coming from a stamp. So it's like a wax seal kind of a stamp. The stamp illustrates how one takes rebirth in a future life in accordance with actions one has done in this life. That is, it makes an imprint, right? And then 5, fire coming from a magnifying glass. The magnifying glass illustrates how one exists as one type of being and is then reborn as another. And then 6, a sprout arising from a seed. The seed illustrates how one does not cease and become non-existent. So these are the 6 of those analogies. Now 7 is the production of saliva when someone says the word sour. The sour taste illustrates how one takes rebirth due to actions one has experienced. And then the 8th one is the sound of an echo. The echoing sound illustrates how one takes a rebirth when causes and conditions are present without other annulling conditions. It illustrates how a reborn individual is not the same as or different from that of the earlier life. So this is how he's explaining what he has told his father about this. And then he says, furthermore, O great king, all of these analogies are things that come about when 3 conditions are gathered together. For example, when there are teachers, students, and sense faculties, we have recitation and language learning. When there exist butter, wicks, and vessels, we have lamps. When there are bright skies, faces, and mirrors, we have reflections. When there are signets, lumps of clay, and human manual effort, we have impressions and images from stamps. When there are crystals, sunlight, grass, and wood, we get fire. When there are seeds, earth, and moisture, we get sprouts. When there is salt, a previous experience of drinking salty water, and when the word sour is pronounced, people then begin to salivate. When someone speaks, when there is no other loud sound, and when there is a nearby mountain, then an echo will occur. These are all analogies showing how sentient beings' rebirths are not made by agents, but are produced through the causal conditions of actions and afflictive emotions. So he then explains in the sutra, I'm going to stop sharing this and I'll take you back to the sutra. Okay, so here's the sutra, and he's going to explain then why 8 analogies are needed. If I had not explained all 8 analogies, but had only taught some of them, then those who maintain rebirth is due to God, arbitrary, due to mere caprice, or without any causes, would use the Shramana Gautama's analogy of recitation to say that consciousness will transmigrate to the next life without losing the aggregates and consciousness of this life. In order to refute those who might say this, I taught the remaining analogies. So he's now going to explain why each analogy is necessary. Some might use the analogy of the lamp to say that the aggregates in both this life and the next exist at one and the same time. So, because you can have the 2 lamps still lighted at the same time, right? To refute them, I taught the remaining analogies. Some others might use the mirror analogy to say that the lame are reborn lame and the fair are reborn fair because the mirror illustrates similarity. To refute them, I taught the remaining analogies. Others might use the analogy of the stamp to say that gods who have died are reborn as gods and that humans who have died are reborn as humans. To refute them, I taught the remaining analogies. Yet others might use the analogy of the magnifying glass to say that from virtue can't come the lower realms and from non-virtue comes high status because a magnifying glass illustrates dissimilarity. To refute them, I taught the remaining analogies. Some might use the analogy of the seed to say that one consciousness grows to be many. In order to refute them, I taught the remaining analogies. Some too might use the analogy of a sour taste because it illustrates experience, to say that those who have a history of rebirth as gods will be reborn as gods, even though they have not done virtuous deeds, and that those who have a history of rebirth in the lower realms will be reborn in the lower realms, even though they have done no non-virtuous deeds. to refute them, I taught the remaining analogies. Yet some others might use the analogy of the echoing sound to say that rebirth does not come from causes and conditions, as they would maintain that such an analogy illustrates agency. In order to refute them, I taught the remaining analogies. It is for these reasons that I taught 8 analogies. So the Buddha is a great explainer. He doesn't want to leave anything to chance. He doesn't want anyone to misunderstand his message. So he goes to great lengths, and he goes on to explain even further, about this. And so in the thing about the sutra that I really appreciated was in these 8 analogies, he gives a very rich account of death and transmigration that doesn't depend on an external being, that isn't about just suddenly ending, and gives us a kind of a sense, a glimpse of what it is that continues. So when we talk about Analayo's work, we're going to discover that the teachings seem to suggest that what continues is consciousness, and that consciousness is particular, but it's not a personality. So it's a stream, and this stream is affected by the actions we take in our lives. So, but it's not a solid thing, and it's not objectified in the Buddha's teaching. That makes sense. It's also not a vast sort of field of consciousness. He chastised one of his disciples for saying, well, there's a field of consciousness and then beings arise in it. He said was incorrect, because there's no consciousness without a body to carry it. So this is why he said his teaching is subtle, complex, hard to understand, right? Because it is. It's hard for us to grasp this. And he provides all these analogies so that we can have some glimpse of it at least. So, okay, so now I'm going to stop sharing this and go back to my map. So, so that's this sutra on the questions about death and transmigration. And I have for you, it's really interesting. You know what the quote of the day was? A samurai once asked Zen master Hakuin where he would go after he died. Hakuin answered, "How am I supposed to know?" "How do you not know? You're a Zen master," exclaimed the samurai. "Yes, but not a dead one," Hakuin answered. So this is about what you can know and what you can't know, I guess. So all of this obviously is dependent on this understanding of dependent origination, the causes and conditions that are that underlie everything that emerges. So I'm going to give you your koan of the day. Koan of the day. And this koan can be found in the Book of Serenity as case 8, and also in the Blue Cliff Record. Here's Kaz Tanahashi's version. It's Baizhang's fox. Every time Baizhang, Zen Master Dahui, gave a Dharma talk, a certain old man would come to listen. He usually left after the talk, but one day he remained. Baizhang asked, "Who is there?" The man said, "I am not actually a human being. I lived and taught on this mountain at the time of the Kashyapa Buddha. One day, a student asked me, does a person who practices with great devotion still fall into cause and effect? I said to him, no, such a person doesn't. Because I said this, I was reborn as a wild fox for 500 lifetimes. Reverend Master, please say a turning word for me and free me from this wild fox body." Then he asked Baizhang, does a person who practices with great devotion still fall into cause and effect? Baizhang said, don't ignore cause and effect. Immediately, the man had great realization. Bowing, he said, I am now liberated from the body of a wild fox. I will stay in the mountain behind the monastery. Master, could you perform the usual services for a deceased monk for me? Baizhang asked the head of the monks' hall to inform the assembly that funeral services for a monk would be held after the midday meal. The monks asked one another, what's going on? Everyone is well. There's no one sick in the Nirvana hall. After their meal, Baizhang led the assembly to a large rock behind the monastery and showed them a dead fox at the rock's base. Following the customary procedure, they cremated the body. That evening, during his lecture in the Dharma hall, Baizhang talked about what had happened that day. Wangbo asked him, a teacher of old gave a wrong answer and became a wild fox for 500 lifetimes. What if he hadn't given a wrong answer? Baizhang said, come closer and I will tell you. Wangbo went closer and slapped Baizhang's face. Laughing, Baizhang clapped his hands and said, I thought it was only barbarians who had unusual beards, but you too have an unusual beard. So that's the koan, Baizhang and the fox. So that's your koan for contemplation this week, Baizhang and the fox. You can find the shorter version in the Book of Serenity, but I will send it out to you so you'll have it in PDF form. Both those versions, the Ta-Nehisi version, the Book of Serenity version, I'll send. And then, okay, last thing I have a poem for you. And this is another wonderful Marie Howe poem, which many of you will know. It's called The Last Time. The last time we had dinner together in a restaurant with white tablecloths, he leaned forward and took my two hands in his hands and said, I'm going to die soon. I want you to know that. And I said, I think I do know. And he said, what surprises me is that you don't. And I said, I do. And he said, what? And I said, know that you're going to die. And he said, no, I mean, know that you are. The last time we had dinner together in a restaurant with white tablecloths, he leaned forward and took my two hands in his hands and said, I'm going to die soon. I want you to know that. And I said, I think I do know. And he said, what surprises me is that you don't. And I said, I do. And he said, what? And I said, know that you're going to die. And he said, no, I mean, know that you are. Okay, so I have homework for you, and I'll send it out in email along with a koan. But I'll tell you what the questions are for the homework. As you think about your life now, what causes and conditions in the past have brought you to this present state? And as you think about your daily life now, what are some of the causes and conditions that might affect some future life? How might your present day intentions manifest later in this life or in some future life? So you'll have a chance to reflect on that, and I'll send it out a little bit later today. So you'll have it. And then your practice is with Baizhang's fox, and just sit with that. Does a person of great accomplishment, of great attainment, fall into cause and effect? Okay. We're at the end of our time now for sure, right? Okay. Thank you so much for being there. And I will see you next week. All right.
Oh, thank you so much, Peg.